Hello and welcome back to That Writer Guy podcast. I am your host, Lyman Raitt, and today's topic is a fun one. It's called What is a Pantser and What is a Plotter or Outliner, and why you may be one or both at the same time. And I'm going to start off with the basics here. First, what exactly is a pantser and what is an outliner or plotter? Well, according to the Urban Dictionary, a pantser is someone who flies by the seat of their pants, doesn't plan anything out, or plans very little. On the other hand, the definition of an outliner or plotter is someone who needs a detailed list of things in chronological order to be able to properly write something and will remain rigid in the overall process. In the writing world, there are a couple of different camps of thought and action. In one camp are those that are all about the outlines. I touched briefly in the last episode about how sometimes some bad writing advice is given, saying the only way to properly write anything is with using an outline. This can be seen as a controversial statement, but the reality is I've seen it and heard it been told before, and so have many others. But even with this being bad advice for some, it's not completely bad advice. The arguments for those who use an outline stem from one of these reasons: simplicity. For an outliner or plotter, using an outline makes sense because it gives them peace of mind and a sense of stability. Having that outline provides them with the order of things in which has to be written for the story in their mind and thought to make sense. Again, simplicity. It makes simple sense. Complexity. The other part, however, for an outliner is to take things that are complex and convert them into something simple. For an example, a multi-character point of view that involves a war, a battle, or something in the realm of action. This can be quite complex, but with an outline, they can map everything out to where it needs to go to simplify the writing process overall. And the outline eliminates the complex aspect. Order. I will tell you honestly that for me, I used an outline for one of my particular book series. It was the Ghost One writing series, the military fiction series that I was writing, and it worked well for me. The reason why it worked well is because of order. I found that I could keep everything in order in the timeline, which then allowed me to write the first book and then use that same outline or thought of an outline to help me write between for book one and the second book. It allowed me to use the same outline all the way through, and those who know what the outlines are and they love them, they love the order, and to them it makes sense. Now, an outliner or plotter feels comfort knowing the outline is there because they have something to fall back on should things not be working. Now, I'm not saying I'm an outliner all the way, but I did mention in a moment ago that I used an outline for one of my series. Now, will an outline work for everyone? No, not always. Will an outline work for in every genre? Well, that depends on the writer, honestly, and what they prefer. If they aren't an outliner, then the outline won't work for them. It's purely that simple. Now, we move on to a pantser. For those who write by the seat of their pants, create the stories as they go, the entire plot might have started off as a general idea and blossomed into something else entirely. This is your definition. I can find myself personally in the pantser category, and the reason is because I have a general idea of the starting point and the stopping point, but I have to figure out where the rest of it goes while I write. Here are some of the compelling arguments from those who write with outlines and why they feel it is the best way. Freedom. The freedom to write what you want, when you want to write it, and not be tied down to any kind of outline or defined linear movement. What this means is that there is no direct limitation to sticking to an outline, which can also mean not having to stick to one spot in the story if you get tired or get stuck. You might be writing along and then all of a sudden you get to a point where you're not sure where to go, but you suddenly have the ideas for further on in the story. You are not stuck with, I have to finish all of this in order to get to that future part. You can just jump ahead and write that and skip around and finish different sections, as these sections might readily come available to you within your mind and within the project you're working on. Now, to say those to say that those who outline can't also skip around, they can, and they might find it a lot easier to do so within the outline in front of them. But the focus for pantsers is the freedom to write what comes out. Another aspect is the thrill. The thrill of pantsing can be quite intense. I know the last time that I was writing a story or a series, I knew where the characters were, I knew what the characters were doing, but I didn't know exactly how everything was going to work itself out. The characters guided me through the scene, and it was quite explosive. This was a thrill for me because I didn't expect it to turn out the way it did. The same can be said for those who are pantsers about the thrill of the unexpected. Another aspect is the ease. I will honestly say that I have found writing as I feel things, writing the scene as it happens, and just letting the flow do whatever it wants has made it easier for me to write than when I was writing using an outline. This isn't always the case, as I do find that at times I can get stuck, and that can cause some problems of their own. But for the most part, I find I am at ease. A pantser can argue that with an outliner that their way is better, or an outliner can do the same with a pantser, but the true reality is one really better than the other? Or is it better to be a bit of both? The basic reality is this: no one way is the best. There's nothing to say that being an outliner or plotter is superior than being a pantser, and if someone tells you otherwise, they aren't exactly true to themselves, and they're not really right. Now, for my own personal take, I have used both the outline and no outline approach to writing. I have found both work in their own respective ways, and I mentioned earlier that I used an outline for my Ghost 1 series that I began to write back in 2014, which was my military fiction series. It worked so well because everything needed to be structured. Without it, I don't see that I could have been able to keep things oriented and constant in some ways, and the outline helped me iron out some details later in the first book as well as while I was writing the second. That being said, I don't use a full outline in my fantasy writing at all. Instead, I have a general process which, if you really want to be technical, could be considered an outline. I call it a guide because it has no actual outline of where anything should go, but has the ideas which I can use anywhere within the writing as long as they fit. When writing my fantasy, I allow the characters to think and to move freely, and honestly, it's quite enjoyable, and yet frustrating at the same time, and I know there are a lot of people that can relate to that as well. I can see the advantage, however, of that an outline can bring people, but I can also see the disadvantages that it can bring as well. There have been times that I have used the outline and found myself completely stuck with no place to go, and the entire idea and project goes dead. Then I find myself finding a new idea to work on, and that old idea, the one I was having a hard time with and it just couldn't get wrapped around because I had the outline and I couldn't move past it, it became hard for me to revive it. I can safely say that I have right now in my old idea folder around 30 different ideas and stories that I've all started that have all ended up dead. And the honest truth is all of them were done while using an outline. Now, I can also say that being a pantser, I've had similar things happen, but not to the extreme that the idea is dead. I can say I have maybe 10 or 12 stories and the ideas that are just not in the same realm, but they're all dead to me because I haven't been able to figure out how to move them forward. I have found for myself that being a pantser allows me the ability to do what I need to do within the story and let the characters have some freedom with what they want to do as well. I have also found the characters can actually dictate what is happening, and it can make for some very interesting writing spurts at times. I also can say that when I get stuck, I let the idea sit, and then I can usually find a way to get around the problem. But not always. The key is to find out what you need to do and what works best for you. Now, if it's a combination of one or the other or both, if it's an outline that works for you, there's nothing wrong with that. If you do you and you be happy and you keep on writing. If you're a pantser and an outline just feels like something that wouldn't work for you, hey, that's cool too. Write on and make those words work for you. If you feel that a combination of both is ideal, then happy writing to you and enjoy the experience. I guess the question of the question that should be told to or asked if you're a pantser or an outliner is to really which one is the really best one for you. And there really is only one answer. Whatever works for you is what you do. No one else can tell you otherwise. And that wraps everything up for this episode, and I hope you have found it somewhat entertaining, informative, or whatever else you might get out of it. I am your host, Lyman Rate, and I thank you for joining me again on That Rider Guy podcast. And I look forward to seeing you on the next episode. And until then, keep the words flowing, the ideas going, and happy writing.